Hashtag Empire of Prey, Part 1. The Xylorian Dominion had spent 20,000 years convincing itself that civilization was measured by the elegance of one's mathematics and the reach of one's gravitational manipulation. Their floating citadels drifted through nebulas like ornate sculptures. Their quantum oracles predicted market fluctuations across 17 dimensions. And their execution pits. Their execution pits were marvels of sadistic engineering that could recreate any death scenario, from the acid rains of Glee's 667cc to the silent crushing depths of gas giant cores. What they hadn't quite grasped, despite all their cosmic arrogance, was that some species evolved differently. Not weaker, just differently. And the Dominion, for all their star-spanning wisdom, had just made the classic mistake of confusing unimpressive with harmless. The current object of their condescending curiosity stood barely 1.6 meters in Dominion standard gravity, with close-cropped black hair, skin marked by old burn scars along her left forearm, and the kind of coiled stillness that suggested either military discipline or a childhood spent learning that loud things tend to die first. Supreme Commander Thrax of the 12th Pacification Armada looked down at his latest acquisition with the smug satisfaction of a collector who had just acquired a rare fungus. This is what the humans sent to defend their outer colony. His thoracic plates vibrated in what passed for laughter among his species. His adjutants, a menagerie of subjugated species united only by their terror of Xylorian displeasure, joined in with obedient chuckles. The human in question, Jax Marchetti, former reconnaissance sergeant of the Colonial Defense Corps, said nothing. He'd learned during his 6 days in their cryo-holding cells that words were currency the Xylorians didn't value. Instead, he counted. Guard rotations, 43 seconds between patrols. Energy weapon frequencies, a predictable pulse pattern he'd memorized by the 3rd day. Hull vibration harmonics, they were entering atmosphere. Old habits from the Badlands campaign. Some lessons stick. Look at those fragile limbs, continued Subcommander Vess, a particularly unimaginative Xylorian whose entire personality could be summarized as loyal to Thrax. No natural armor, no visible weapons, forward-facing eyes like a grazing herbivore. He said the last part with theatrical disgust. If Jax found irony in a species with compound vision criticizing binocular depth perception, he didn't show it. The Xylorians had apparently never studied basic evolutionary biology beyond their homeworld. Forward-facing eyes weren't for grazing. They were for judging distance to a target while closing at full sprint. The transport shuddered as it entered the upper atmosphere of Xylos Prime, the Dominion's capital world and home to the Grand Crucible, the most infamous execution arena in 3 galactic arms. The crowds would love this, Thrax mused, tapping a data slate. A human male against the Void Ripper. Betting pools already favor disembowelment within 20 seconds. Some optimists are giving him 45. The Void Ripper. Jax had heard the whispers in the holding cells. A bioengineered horror that combined the synaptic reflexes of a mantis harrier with the corrosive blood of a Terrakian cave serpent. 7 meters of armored muscle. For independently targeting limbs. And a kill count of 412. The Xylorians were immensely proud of it. They were about to learn that pride didn't digest well. Jax was marched through corridors of living crystal, past windows showing a city of impossible geometry, spires that bent in directions that shouldn't exist, plazas that folded into themselves like origami nightmares. The Grand Crucible itself was a monument to violence disguised as high art, seating for 2 million spectators across 17-dimensional planes. Today's environment, a blasted urban ruin. Broken buildings, blind corners, scattered debris. Terrain that favored someone who knew how to use cover. The announcer's voice slithered across multiple frequencies. Ladies, beings, and undifferentiated entities. A special exhibition. A human primitive from the recently subdued colony of Reaches and will face our undefeated champion. The crowd's reaction was bored amusement. Jax was pushed into a prep chamber with a transparent barrier. Through it, he could see the arena, empty except for rubble and shadows. Any final noises? Vess asked. Jax looked at him with the flat calm of someone who had already accepted the math. You might want to update your will. The Xylorians found this hilarious. The gates opened. Jack stepped into the ruins and immediately began what his old instructors would have called a hostile terrain appreciation. Sightlines, mapped. Cover positions, cataloged. Environmental hazards, noted. Escape routes, calculated. The crowd's murmur shifted as he moved. They'd expected cowering. Instead, they watched someone who walked like he owned every shadow. And now, the announcer boomed. The undefeated champion of Xylo's prime. The Void Ripper. The opposite gate irised open. The creature didn't emerge so much as unfold. 7 meters of nightmare physics. Limbs moving in patterns that shouldn't be possible. Each step an insult to normal biology. Its sensory clusters locked onto Jax immediately. It began moving toward him with the confidence of something that had never lost. The crowd leaned forward. That's when the arena's omnidirectional scanners, designed to display combatant data for the crowd, caught the glint of a small metal tag hanging from Jax's neck. Dog tags. Colonial Defense Corps issue. Standard coding. The translation systems dutifully projected the information on holographic displays throughout the venue. Name, Marchetti Jax. Serial, CDC, 8823K. Classification, Tactical Hazard, Tier Alpha. The crowd's murmur died. Tactical Hazard, Tier Alpha. In the VIP section, xenobiologist Dr. Zelkath pulled up Humanity's file and felt her filter gills go dry. Humans hadn't just climbed their food chain. They'd burned it down. They were persistence predators with tool use intelligence, pack coordination, and a brutal evolutionary history of hunting things that hunted them back. And the Xylorians had just locked one in an arena. The Void Ripper, unaware of the growing unease, continued its approach. Confident. Direct. Exactly what Jax had expected. He picked up a piece of rebar from the rubble. Not as a weapon. As a message. The creature lunged. And Jax was already gone, moving into the ruins, into the shadows, into the ancient rhythm that his species had perfected over 2 million years. The hunt had begun. Empire of Prey, Part 2. The Void Ripper's first attack carved a trench through solid debris where Jax had been standing 0.3 seconds earlier. The crowd gasped, a sound that quickly died as they realized the human was already 8 meters away, moving between shattered walls with the fluid economy of someone who measured energy expenditure like ammunition. Don't waste movement. Let the enemy waste theirs. Jax's old drill sergeant's voice echoed in his head as he slipped through a collapsed doorway. The Ripper recovered faster than anything natural should, its 4 limbs scattering rubble as it pivoted and launched again. This time, a clawed limb whipped sideways, fast enough to shear through starship plating. Jax dropped into a roll, felt the wind of its passage ruffle his hair, and came up with a chunk of ferrocrete in his hand. He didn't throw it. He placed it directly into the joint of the Ripper's second left limb as the creature overextended. Not hard enough to break. Hard enough to annoy. Hard enough to establish a pattern. The Ripper shrieked, a sound that vibrated through the arena's dimensional stabilizers, and retreated 2 steps, reassessing. Its sensory clusters swept the ruins, searching for heat signatures, movement, anything. Jax was already behind a different wall, breathing slow and deep. They engineer these things for burst performance, he thought. Explosive speed. Overwhelming force. High metabolic cost. He'd seen the same design philosophy in Xylorian weapons. Impressive on paper. Devastating in the first 30 seconds. But the Xylorians had never fought a species that specialized in the long game. In the VIP section, Dr. Zelkath's research terminal flashed with incoming data from the Dominion's central xenobank. She scanned the human physiological profile and felt her gills tighten further. Resting heart rate, 60 to 100 beats per minute. Maximum sustainable exertion, hours. Recovery time, minutes. Pain tolerance, extreme. Psychological response to danger. Adrenaline sharpens cognitive function rather than impairing it. They don't fight like predators, she whispered to herself. They fight like endurance hunters. They don't need to be faster. They just need to wait. The Void Ripper attacked again, more cautiously this time, circling, probing, trying to corner its prey. Jax let it herd him toward what looked like a dead end. The crowd's earlier boredom had curdled into something else, a tension that spread through the stands like a contagion. The creature lunged into the apparent trap. Jax ran up the wall, 3 steps, push off, twist in midair, and landed on the Ripper's back. His hands found the armored seam where the creature's primary neural cluster connected to its central nervous system. He didn't have a blade. Didn't need one. He pulled. The Ripper's nervous system screamed. Its limbs spasmed. It crashed sideways into the rubble, and Jax rode it down, rolling free before the thrashing could crush him. The arena was silent. Commander Thrax stared at his tactical display. The human's heart rate had peaked at 142, well below what Dominion combat doctrine predicted for lethal engagement. His breathing was slightly elevated. No signs of panic hormones. No stress markers. In fact, by every objective medical reading, the human looked like he was enjoying himself. "Give me Fleet Admiral Vor," Thrax said, his thoracic plates clicking with something that might have been fear. "Emergency priority. Tell him we need to recall every ship currently engaged in human territory." "Sir," his comms officer stammered. "That human just disabled our champion in 30 seconds with rubble and physics. He's not even military. Intelligence says he was colonial militia." The implications landed like a gravity hammer. The Void Ripper struggled to rise. Its limbs worked unevenly. The neural disruption had scrambled its coordination. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also confused. Hurt. Learning fear for the first time. Jax stood in the center of the ruins, waiting. He wasn't trying to kill it. He'd already proven he could. He was waiting for the Xylorians to prove they could learn. The creature charged one final time, not with confidence, but with desperation. Jax sidestepped, caught its primary limb at the joint, and leveraged. The Ripper's own momentum did the rest. It crashed face first into a support pillar, stunned senseless. Jax let go, stepped back, didn't strike again. The silence stretched for 10 full seconds. Then, from somewhere in the upper stands, a single Xylorian began to clap. It was not a sound of celebration. It was the sound of an empire realizing it had made a terrible, terrible mistake. Thrax rose from his command throne. His mandibles moved in a pattern his subordinates had never seen before, submission gestures. "Open the arena gates," he ordered, "and prepare my formal clothing. I need to speak with the human." "Sir, you're going in person?" "The Void Ripper was our best weapon against their kind," Thrax said quietly, "and he just dismantled it with construction debris and patience." "Yes, Adjutant. I'm going in person." The gates irised open. Thrax stepped onto the arena floor, weapons holstered, postured deliberately non-threatening. Jax turned to face him, still breathing easily, still calm. "Human," Thrax began, "I believe we have miscalculated." Jax's smile was thin and utterly without warmth. "You have no idea how badly." In the stands, the betting syndicates were already collapsing. The Dominion's intelligence networks were scrambling to reclassify humanity from minor nuisance to existential threat. And across 17-dimensional viewing platforms, 2 million spectators had just watched a single unarmed human do something impossible. The Xylorian Dominion's expansion into human space had just become a survival question. And the answer was not looking good for the Empire. #Empire of Prey, Part 3. Thrax stood in the rubble, acutely aware that every tactical calculation he'd built his career on had just been reduced to dust. The human, Jax Marchetti, former militia, watched him with the patience of something that had already decided the outcome. "We are willing to discuss terms," Thrax said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "Compensation. Withdrawal. Whatever is necessary to de-escalate this misunderstanding." Jax tilted his head. "Misunderstanding. You killed 300 civilians on Reach's End. You called it pacification." The crowd above held its collective breath. Thrax's mandibles clicked nervously. "We were operating under faulty intelligence. Our assessment of human capabilities was wrong," Jax finished. "Catastrophically wrong. Arrogantly wrong." He took a single step forward. Thrax did not retreat, but every instinct screamed at him to run. "Here's what's going to happen. First, you're going to release every human prisoner in Dominion custody. Not negotiate. Release." "Agreed." "Second, you're going to withdraw all military forces from human-colonized space. Permanently. No reassessments. No strategic redeployments. Gone." Thrax hesitated for exactly half a second. Then he nodded. "Agreed." "Third," Jax's voice dropped lower, colder. "You're going to broadcast this conversation. Every Dominion world. Every subject species. Every ally. They're going to watch you agree to these terms, and they're going to know why. The full weight of the demand settled onto Thrax's shoulders. Public humiliation. Loss of face across an entire galactic empire. His species had ruled through fear and perceived invincibility for 20,000 years. This would shatter that illusion forever. You're asking me to destroy my empire's credibility, Thrax whispered. I'm asking you to choose between your pride and your survival, Jax said. Because right now, I'm being generous. My government doesn't know I'm here. My people don't know what you did to Reach's end. If I walk out of this arena and make a single transmission home. He let the sentence hang. In the VIP section, Dr. Zelkath was already running projections. She'd seen the human military files now, the real ones, pulled from intercepted Colonial Defense Corps data packets. Humanity had warships. They had standing armies. They had weapons designed not for arena spectacle, but for extinction events. And they had never, in their entire bloody evolutionary history, lost a war on their homeworld. Take the deal, she whispered, though Thrax couldn't hear her. For all our sakes, take the deal. Thrax's thoracic plates flattened, the Xylorian equivalent of closing one's eyes before a fall. The broadcast will begin immediately. Your terms are accepted. Jax nodded slowly. One more thing. The Void Ripper. He gestured toward the unconscious creature. It's not a weapon. It's a tortured animal. You're going to retire it. Medical care. No more fighting. Understood. Understood. And Commander? Jax's smile returned. Thin, sharp, cold. Next time you think about expanding into someone else's territory, do the research first. The broadcast began. Across 1,000 worlds, 200 subject species watched their masters bow to a barefoot human in a ruined arena. The Dominion's aura of invincibility cracked in real time. In the control center, Thrax's comms officer received a priority transmission from Fleet Admiral Vor. She read it twice, her coloring draining. Sir, she said quietly, Admiral Vor confirms human military forces are mobilizing near the Veil Nebula. They're not asking for explanations. They're asking for our coordinates. Thrax turned back to Jax. Your people are already moving. Jax shrugged. I told you. I was being generous. They might not be. The human turned and walked toward the arena gate. Not hurried, not triumphant, just done. Like someone who had clocked out after a long shift. The crowd parted for him. No one tried to stop him. No one even breathed too loud. As he passed through the gate, he paused. Look back at Thrax one last time. The Dominion made one real mistake, Jax said. Not underestimating us. Every empire does that. The mistake was thinking you could treat us like prey, and we wouldn't notice. He gestured at the arena, the crowd, the shattered champion. We've been prey before. On Earth, before we had tools or fire or civilizations. And you know what we learned? Thrax couldn't answer. We learned that prey that survives long enough stops being prey. Jax stepped through the gate. Enjoy the broadcast. He was gone. The arena remained silent. The cameras kept rolling. And the Xylorian Dominion's 20,000-year reign of terror entered its final chapter. Not with a war, not with a rebellion, but with a single human walking away from a fight he'd already won. In the depths of space, human warships changed course. Not toward Dominion territory, toward home. They'd made their point. The rest, as they said on ancient Earth, was negotiation. #Empire of Prey, Part 4. Jax didn't sleep that night. Not because the Xylorians denied him quarters. They'd given him a suite that rivaled their nobility's best. Not because of adrenaline. His heart rate had normalized within minutes of leaving the arena. He didn't sleep because the data tablet on his nightstand kept blinking with incoming messages he wasn't sure he wanted to read. The first was from Admiral Morrison, Colonial Defense Corps. Asterisk status report requested. Priority Alpha, asterisk. The second was from Governor Ishida of Reach's End. Asterisk Survivors Council wants to speak with you. They're calling you a hero, asterisk. The third, buried at the bottom of the list, was from someone he hadn't heard from in 6 years. The name made his chest tighten. Asterisk private channel. No encryption. I know you're alive. We need to talk. Sergeant Mira Vance asterisk. Vance. His old squad leader from the Badlands campaign. The woman who'd pulled him out of a burning transport after a plasma round destroyed his left side. The woman who'd gone dark after the war, vanished into the frontier, never explained why. Jax sat up, reaching for the tablet. The message had been sent 12 hours ago, before the arena fight. Before anyone knew where he was. before the broadcast. How did she know? He opened the channel. No text. Just a single audio file, time-stamped to his arrival at Xylos Prime. The moment his transport entered Dominion space. He pressed play. Silence. Then breathing. Then a voice he recognized, but barely. Older, harder, stripped of whatever warmth had survived the war. Asterisk, Jax. You're walking into something bigger than the Dominion. Bigger than the arena. The Xylorians didn't find Earth by accident. Someone pointed them at us. Someone with access to colonial navigation data. Someone who wanted to see what would happen when an empire poked the bear. Asterisk. A pause. Asterisk. I can't say more on this channel. Meet me at the old coordinates. You have 72 hours before they notice I'm gone. Asterisk. The file ended. Jax stared at the tablet for a long moment. The old coordinates. That could only mean one place, the Badlands. The uncharted frontier sector where their unit had been deployed for 18 months. Where they'd found something in the ruins of a dead civilization. Something the Colonial Defense Corps had classified so deeply that even the officers in charge weren't cleared to know the details. Something that had gotten half their squad killed. And now someone had pointed an alien empire at human space using colonial navigation data. Jax stood up, crossed the suite to the window. Below, the lights of Xylos Prime glittered like a wound in the dark, beautiful, ancient, and utterly unaware of the game being played around it. The Dominion thought they were conquerors. They were pawns. And somewhere in the Badlands, Mira Vance was waiting with answers to questions Jax had stopped asking years ago. He typed a single response. Asterisk 72 hours. Don't disappear again, asterisk. Then he deleted the message thread, erased the logs, and began packing. The Xylorian guards outside his door didn't notice when he slipped out an hour later. They didn't notice the transport that lifted from a private pad on the capital's outskirts. They didn't notice that their guest had vanished into the space lanes, heading not toward Earth, but toward the dark, toward the truth, toward whatever had started this war before the first shot was ever fired. The tablet's final message, unsent, sat in Jax's pocket as the stars streaked past. Someone pointed them at us. He intended to find out who, and why, and what they wanted with a species that had spent 2 million years learning to survive the unsurvivable. The Badlands waited. So did the answers. And somewhere in the dark between stars, something else was waiting too. Something that had been watching humanity for a very, very long time. Hashtag Empire of Prey, Part 5. The Badlands stretched before Jax like a wound in the galaxy, a nebular graveyard of dead stars and older secrets. His stolen transport drifted through the debris field, running silent, as the coordinates pulsed on his display. 72 hours. He had made it in 40. The rendezvous point was a derelict station, its hull scarred by centuries of radiation and neglect. Once, it had been a research outpost of the species that came before, the ones whose ruins had cost Jax's squad so much. Now it was just a tomb. He docked in silence. His boots echoed on the gangway. The air recyclers had failed decades ago, but his vac suit registered breathable atmosphere, thin, cold, but alive. Someone had been here recently. Vance? He called out. No answer. He moved deeper into the station, past laboratories frozen in mid-experiment, past barracks where bunks still held the imprint of bodies long gone. The hair on his neck stood up. He'd felt this before. On the Badlands campaign. Right before everything went wrong. A light flickered ahead. A door slid open, manually, recently. Inside, a woman sat at a console. Mira Vance looked older than her years, gray streaks in her dark hair, a scar across her throat that hadn't been there 6 years ago. She didn't turn when he entered. You came, she said quietly. You said someone pointed the Xylorians at us. She turned. Her eyes were hollow. I didn't just say it. I proved it. She tapped the console. A hologram flickered to life, star charts, colonial routes, and a single highlighted transmission chain originating from somewhere else. Somewhere not human, not Xylorian. The species that built this station, Vance continued. They didn't go extinct naturally, Jax. They were erased. And whoever did it left behind watchdogs. Sensors. Hunters. When we explored these ruins 6 years ago, we tripped an alarm we didn't even know existed. Jax felt the pieces click into place. The Xylorians didn't come to human space for territory. They were sent. Not sent. Vance stood, her expression grim. Asterisk tested star. Someone is running an experiment. They want to see what happens when different predators meet, and we're the newest variable in their equation. The console beeped. A new transmission, not from Earth, not from the Dominion. It came from the dark between stars. No origin point. No encryption that made sense. Vance's face went pale. They know we're here. The transmission resolved into a single line of text, translated into a dozen languages simultaneously. Observation phase complete. Initiating contact protocol. You have survived the arena. Now enter the real game. The station shuddered. Outside the viewport, the Badlands began to shift, nebulae rearranging themselves, debris fields coalescing into patterns that looked almost like writing. Jax grabbed Vance's arm. What did you trigger? She shook her head slowly. I don't know, but I don't think we're the prey anymore, Jax. Beyond the viewport, something enormous began to take shape. Not a ship, not a station. Something older. Something that had been waiting. And for the first time since the arena, Jax Marchetti felt real fear. Not of dying. Of what came next. Empire of Prey. Part 6, Finale. The thing that emerged from the Badlands was not a ship. It was not a weapon. It was a presence, a shifting, iridescent structure of impossible geometry that rearranged the stars around it like a musician tuning strings. Jax and Vance watched from the station's viewport as the nebula folded itself into a corridor of light, and at the end of that corridor, something walked through. Not something. Someone. 3 figures, humanoid but wrong. Too symmetrical, too still, their movements precise in ways that bypassed normal biology entirely. They stepped onto the station's docking ring without pressure suits, without visible life support. The airlock cycled open on its own. You should run, Vance whispered. Where? Jax replied. The figures entered the chamber. Their faces were smooth, featureless, masks or skin, impossible to tell. The lead one raised a hand, and the console between Jax and Vance flickered with new text. We have watched your species for 200,000 years. Since you first learned to make fire. Since you first hunted the saber-tooth. Since you first looked at the stars and decided to reach them. Jax stepped forward. You sent the Xylorians to test us. The figure tilted its head. The console updated. Not a test. A measurement. We needed to know if you were ready. Ready for what? The 3 figures looked at each other. A silent conversation that lasted less than a heartbeat. Then, in unison, they did something unexpected. They knelt. The console blazed with light. We are the gardeners of this galaxy. We tend the civilizations that show promise. We protect them from the darkness between galaxies. And for 200,000 years, we waited for a species like yours. One that could not be broken. One that turned every adversity into evolution. One that looked at predators and said, watch this. Vance grabbed Jax's arm. They're not our enemies. They're recruiters. The darkness is coming. It has devoured 1,000 galaxies. We have held it back for 1 billion years, but we are tired. Humans are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the wisest. But you are the only species we have ever seen that refuses to lose. The lead figure rose, extended a hand. Its palm held nothing. No weapon, no gift, no catch. Just an offer. Join US. Not as subjects. As partners. Help US hold the line. Or refuse, and we will seal your sector of space. Protect you from what is coming until we fall. But know this. If we fall, the darkness will find you eventually. And next time, there will be no gardeners to warn you. Jax looked at Vance. She looked at him. 18 months in the Badlands. 6 years apart. A lifetime of fighting, losing, surviving. He reached out and took the figure's hand. We have conditions, he said. The console flickered with what might have been laughter. We expected nothing less. Beyond the viewport, the corridor of light expanded. Human ships, the Colonial Defense Corps, responding to the anomaly, arrived on the edge of the Badlands. Admirals gaped at their screens. Scientists wept at the data pouring in. And on the derelict station, a former militia sergeant stood at the threshold of something no human had ever touched. Not the end of the story. The beginning of a bigger one. Welcome to the garden, predators. The darkness will be here in 73 years. We suggest you start training. Jax smiled. A real smile, for the first time in years. We've been training for 2 million years, he said. We're just getting warmed up. The stars held their breath. And somewhere in the depths of human space, the drums of war began to beat, not for conquest, not for survival, but for something humanity had always done best, proving everyone wrong. The end. Asterisk. But the war has not yet begun. Asterisk.